Z. There's a question that haunts many people who consider themselves people of faith. It's a question that whispers in the quiet moments, in the middle of a busy day or late at night when you're alone with your thoughts. The question is simple but profound. Where is the joy? Where is this joy of faith that I keep hearing about, that I'm supposed to feel, that seems to come so naturally to others around me? Wake up in the morning and go through the motions. You might say your prayers. You might read something sacred. You go to your services. You do what you're supposed to do. And yet there's this lingering emptiness. There's this absence of something that should be there according to everything you've learned and everything you've been told. And so you begin to wonder if something is wrong with you. Wonder if you're not spiritual enough, if you're not trying hard enough, if you somehow missed the memo on how to unlock this joy that others seem to possess so freely. But what if I told you that the problem isn't with you at all? What if the reason you're not experiencing the joy of faith isn't because you're deficient in some fundamental way, but rather because we have collectively misunderstood what that joy actually is and how it actually arrives in our lives? Let me take you back to the beginning of your faith journey, whether that was recent or decades ago. When you first believed, when you first opened yourself to the possibility of something greater than yourself. There was something different about that moment. There was a lightness, There was a sense of possibility and meaning that seemed to expand before you, like a door opening into a room full of light. You felt seen. You felt known. You felt like your life finally made sense in a way it never had before. That feeling, that's real. That's not an illusion. That's the genuine experience of encountering something transcendent, something that awakens us to a larger reality. But here's what often happens next. We mistake that initial awakening for something that should be permanent. We believe that joy is a constant state we should maintain, and we begin to build walls around that feeling, trying to preserve it, trying to keep it exactly as it was in that first moment of clarity. We develop practices and routines. We follow rules. We set boundaries. We do all of these things with the sincere belief that if we just try hard enough, if we just are good enough, we can return to that feeling and stay there forever. And so begins the exhaustion. This is perhaps the first reason you're not experiencing the joy of faith. You've turned joy into a destination, into something you need to achieve and then maintain. You've transformed something that was supposed to liberate you into a new kind of burden. The irony is crushing. You came to faith looking for freedom and meaning, and you've accidentally turned it into another performance. Another way to measure yourself against an impossible standard. Think about how this manifests in your daily life. You're anxious about whether you're praying enough, meditating enough, living purely enough. You compare yourself to others in your faith community who seem to have figured this out. Someone who appears joyful in their faith, and you assume they doing something right that you not doing. So you redouble your efforts. You try harder. You become more vigilant. You add more practices, more restrictions, more rules to follow. And somehow, with each addition, the joy seems to slip further away, like water running through your fingers, no matter how tightly you try to clench your fist. This brings us to the second reason you might not be experiencing the joy of faith. You've confused obligation with connection. Somewhere along the way, faith became about doing the right things rather than about entering into a living, breathing relationship with something greater than yourself. A relationship, you see, is alive. It moves. It surprises you. It doesn't operate according to a fixed script, but obligation is static. Obligation says, do this, don't do that. Follow these rules and you'll achieve the outcome you want. Obligation is transactional. Obligation is about exchange. You give effort, you should receive reward. You follow the rules, you should feel the joy. But faith isn't transactional. Faith is relational. And relationships are messy and complicated. And they don't always give you what you expect on the timeline you expect it. A real relationship with the sacred, with God, with the universe, with whatever you conceive of as greater than yourself, is something that requires presence rather than performance. It requires vulnerability rather than vigilance. It requires you to show up as you actually are, not as you think you should be. So many people have divorced themselves from genuine faith because they were taught to fear their own authenticity. They were told that their doubts were weaknesses, that their questions were signs of insufficient belief, that their struggles were evidence of moral failing. And so they learned to hide. They learned to pretend. They learned to perform a version of themselves that they thought was more acceptable, more faithful, more worthy. But here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. You cannot have genuine joy while you're reliving a lie. Okay. You cannot experience the presence of something sacred while you're busy managing the image of someone you not. This is the third reason you're not experiencing the joy of faith. You've been taught to fear yourself. You've been conditioned to believe that your authentic self, with all its questions and fears and doubts and wild desires and messy emotions, is fundamentally separate from your spiritual self. But that split is an illusion. You are not divided. You are not broken. You are a whole person, and faith that works, that actually brings joy, is faith that integrates all of who you are, not faith that asks you to disown large parts of yourself. When you can bring your whole self to your faith, when you can say I don't understand this, when you can ask why, when you can admit that you're scared, when you can acknowledge that sometimes you feel empty even though you're supposed to feel full, something extraordinary happens. The pressure releases, the exhaustion begins to lift. And in that release, in that space where you stop performing and start being, genuine connection becomes possible. Genuine joy becomes possible. But there's another layer to this, and it's perhaps the most difficult one to examine. Big. The fourth reason you might not be experiencing the joy of faith is that we live in a culture that has convinced us that joy is a feeling we should have all the time, or at least most of the time. We've conflated joy with happiness, and we've made both of them into states of constant emotional elevation. We believe that if we're not smiling, if we're not experiencing pleasure and satisfaction and contentment, then something has gone wrong. And this belief permeates everything, including our faith. But this is profoundly misguided. Joy and happiness are not the same thing. Happiness is a feeling that comes and goes. It's dependent on circumstances. It's fleeting by nature. Joy, true joy, is something deeper. It's a kind of peace. It's a sense of rightness even in the middle of difficulty. It's the ability to find meaning and purpose even when things are hard. Real joy doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. Real joy is available even in the middle of suffering, even in the middle of doubt, even in the middle of confusion. When you're waiting for happiness all the time, you miss the joy that's right in front of you. You're so busy looking for the feeling of lightness that you miss the deep satisfaction of showing up authentically. You're so preoccupied with whether you should feel better that you miss the quiet strength that comes from facing difficulty with an open heart. This is such a fundamental misunderstanding, and it causes so much unnecessary suffering. The fifth reason you might not be experiencing the joy of faith is that you've made it too small. You've confined it to particular moments and particular places. 2. You've decided that faith happens in a building on certain days, or that spiritual experience is something that occurs during prayer or meditation or ritual. And the rest of the time, you've bifurcated your life. You've created sacred time and sacred space, and ordinary time and ordinary space, as if the sacred only exists in carefully delineated areas. But this is not how transcendence actually works. The sacred is everywhere. It's in the difficult conversation with a loved one. It's in the moment of solidarity with someone who is suffering. It's in the ordinary tasks of caring for yourself and others. It's in the small kindnesses and the quiet moments of connection. It's in the work you do, whatever that work is, when you do it with genuine care and attention. When you expand your conception of where faith lives, when you begin to see sacred dimension in ordinary moments, everything changes. The joy you've been looking for is unhiding in a temple or a chapel, or in some internal experience that only happens during designated spiritual times. It's available everywhere, all the time, if you have eyes to see it. This brings us to perhaps the most important reason you're not experiencing the joy of faith. You've lost touch with gratitude. Gratitude isn't just about being thankful for good things. Gratitude is a fundamental posture toward existence. It's a way of saying yes to life as it is. It's an acknowledgement that you're alive, that you exist, that there is such a thing as being at all. When you cultivate genuine gratitude, when you actually pause and let yourself feel thankful for the things in your life, something shifts, your nervous system relaxes. Your defensive posture softens. You become able to receive and joy. Real joy is only possible for those who can receive. Think about a time when you were genuinely grateful for something. Not performatively grateful, not the kind of gratitude you feel like you should feel, but real, deep gratitude. In that moment, were you anxious? Were you worried about measuring up? Were you concerned about whether you were doing things right? Or were you simply present, simply alive to the goodness that was right in front of you? That presence, that aliveness, that's what the joy of faith feels like. It's not a reward you earn. It's not the payoff for doing everything correctly. It's the natural state that arises when you stop fighting reality and start actually showing up to it. Now, I want to be very clear about something. When I'm talking about the joy of faith, I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm not suggesting that you should walk around smiling all the time, pretending that everything is wonderful when it's not. I'm not advocating for spiritual bypassing, the act of using faith as a way to avoid dealing with real problems and real pain. Genuine faith doesn't protect you from suffering. It teaches you how to find meaning and presence within suffering. It teaches you how to love anyway. It teaches you how to keep your heart open, even when opening your heart might get you hurt. The joy of faith is compatible with sorrow. It's compatible with anger. It's compatible with doubt. Compatible with all the full spectrum of human emotion. Because faith that's real is faith that's integrated into your full human experience. Not faith that asks you to transcend your humanity or escape it. So, what do you actually do with all of this? How do you move from understanding these things intellectually to actually experiencing a shift in your faith life? The answer is deceptively simple, though it's far from easy to implement. Begin by releasing your grip. You stop trying so hard to achieve the feeling you think you should have. You stop measuring yourself. You stop comparing. You stop performing. You start telling the truth about where you actually are. You say, I'm struggling. You say, I don't understand. You say, I'm tired of pretending. You say, I need help. And you make these declarations not to some external authority, but to yourself and to whatever you conceive of as sacred. Then, you practice presence. You show up to your life exactly as it is, with all its imperfection and all its ongoing mystery. You pay attention. You listen. You notice the moments of connection and wonder that are always happening, even in ordinary, mundane circumstances. You practice gratitude, not as a performance, but as a genuine training in perception. Learn to see what's actually beautiful about your life, rather than constantly looking at what's missing or what's wrong. And perhaps most importantly, you practice compassion, first toward yourself. You stop treating yourself like someone who's failing at faith. You stop looking at yourself with the critical eye of a disappointed teacher. You look at yourself with kindness, the same kind of kindness you would naturally offer to someone you love who is struggling, because you deserve that kindness. Your doubt deserves kindness. Your questions deserve kindness. Your struggle deserves kindness. And when you finally offer yourself that compassion, something magical happens. You become able to be present. You become able to receive. You become able to experience joy. The joy of faith isn't something you achieve. It's not something you earn or unlock or gain access to. If you just try harder or understand enough or follow the rules carefully enough, it's something you allow. It's something that emerges when you stop resisting and start receiving. It's something that becomes possible when you integrate all of who you are into your spiritual life rather than splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You don't have to figure everything out. You don't have to become perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to show up as yourself, authentic and present, and willing to be surprised. You have to believe that you're worthy of connection with something sacred exactly as you are. And you have to take that belief into your daily life, into your relationships, into your work, into the small choices and moments that make up a life. That's where the real joy lives. That's where it's always been waiting for you. And it's available to you right now, in this moment, exactly as you are.